the best a man can get.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to First Things First. I'm Jen Wolf. That is Nick Wright. That is Chris Canty in for Chris Carter because we can only swap one Chris for another Chris.
Canty.
It's still CC.
It is still CC, and it's great to have you, and we appreciate you spending the morning with us. We appreciate you spending the morning with us. We've got a big program today. Tom Brady is climbing back up the quarterback ranks. The 49ers might be trying to trade for OBJ, but we have to start this morning with the ever-growing fracture in the Steelers organization. So let's take you back. On Monday, it was reported the two best players on the team, Big Ben and Antonio Brown, got into a heated argument in practice, leading to Brown's benching on Sunday. Well, it's now being reported that Brown actually requested a trade from the Steelers, a trade that is near impossible due to a heavy cap hit and the fact that he's one of the best receivers in football. Let's hear from quarterback Ben Roethlisberger on what went down.
People are making a big deal about a walkthrough on Wednesday, that there was a blow-up, a fight between he and I. I don't know anything about that. If there was a blow-up or something, I sure as heck didn't see it. This big deal was made about that, and I'm not really sure where that comes from. You know, AB and I talked to AB on Thursday morning because after the walkthrough, AB left on Wednesday, and then on Thursday morning I talked to AB, and everything was great and fine. And then this story just keeps growing. So like I said, I consider AB one of my closest friends on the team.
Well, we should just mention, if everything was fine, perhaps Antonio Brown would have showed up for practice on Thursday or Friday or Saturday and then not just walk in on Sunday and expect to play and then was subsequently benched. Nick, I'll start with you. Should the Steelers actually try to trade Antonio Brown?
Yes. It takes a long walk to get me to the place where I would even contemplate trading a player of Antonio Brown's caliber for a team that is not in rebuilding mode. It'd be one thing if Ben Roethlisberger just announced his retirement and we were like, well, the Steelers are tearing it all down. And you've sat with me for the last 2 years. A lot of the stuff Odell does, doesn't even bother me. Not only do I excuse it, I don't even know if it should be talked about. There are a lot of things that I can say that is the cost of doing business with young, rich, powerful alpha males or alpha humans, male or female. Like that's just the cost of doing business. But I need to know you're going to show up for work. I need to know I can count on you. And for all the distractions a guy like Odell can bring, there's never been an instance where it's not like he went on that boat trip in Miami and never came back. Like there was never a concern about will he be there for his teammates. And Mike Tomlin had an interesting quote about Antonio Brown a few years ago when he wouldn't stop getting these celebration penalties in the end zone. And Mike Tomlin said, well, what do you want me to do? Not play him? Because you really are out of options. You can only fine a player so much. When he's paid at AB's level, the fines don't impact him at all. And so when Antonio has gotten to a place where in a must-win game, their biggest game of the season, a season that could be salvaged if they win, if they would have won last week, which they did, and get in, which they didn't, he doesn't show up for work. He doesn't show up for work in multiple days. I have to at least see what the market is for him. I have to see, can I bring in enough talent back to deal with the talent going out the door, just to have some type of accountability in the workplace.
See, I couldn't disagree with you more. Because Antonio Brown is arguably the best wide receiver in the National Football League, and you talk about showing up for work, Antonio Brown has showed up for work every single Sunday. If you go back to 2013, he's been the most productive receiver in the league, whether it's catches, yards, targets, you name it, whatever metric you want to use to judge receivers, he's been the best. He's had 1,026 targets since 2013. The next closest wide receiver doesn't have 900. So that just puts it into context what kind of player that we're talking about. And if you consider the fact that you're going to have a 37-year-old quarterback at the start of next season, you're probably going to lose Le'Veon Bell in free agency. I mean, you have to hold on to a playmaker of his caliber because your team is trying to compete for a championship. And the other thing that nobody's talking about is that this defense is finally in a position where you can compete for a championship. I mean, a couple of years ago, when you were talking about the handoff from Dick LeBeau, their defensive coordinator, to Keith Butler, that wasn't the smoothest handoff, and their defense struggled for a couple of years. But the last couple of seasons, they've been outstanding. I mean, this year they led the league in sacks. They're 6th in total defense. I mean, to take away Antonio Brown from this team right now, I think it severely hurt your chances of competing for a championship in 2019.
Well, then let me just ask you as a player, Antonio Brown seems to not want to be there. He's the one that seems to have reportedly requested this trade. If you're a player like that, can you make amends and all of a sudden sort of pick up where you left off once I forget what Big Ben says. This thing had to have gotten big enough where he didn't want to play there anymore.
No, I'm interested to hear what Mike Tomlin's going to have to say, because he's got a noon press conference, and no doubt people are going to ask him about this. But you have to keep this in mind, Jenna. It's the end of a very frustrating season for the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? So emotions are going to be high, and I understand that AB might not necessarily be thinking things through, soundly and being reasonable about the situation. So you give things time, and maybe this can all blow over. I mean, you're still talking about having 4 months until OTAs and offseason workouts start. So there's some time, and maybe the organization and AB can mend fences. But I think the thing that's the most concerning is that you are in a situation where this team is built to win right now. And you have a big part of that that's unhappy. And so the Pittsburgh Steelers have to figure out how they're going to make this work with AB, at least for the next couple of seasons. Keep in mind, Ben Roethlisberger is in a contract year in 2019. So I think depending on how next season goes is how the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to approach the foreseeable future. But you got to give yourself another opportunity to make a run at it.
But you mentioned that the defense played better than we give them credit for. And we all know how amazing of a player Antonio Brown is. And this year they had another wide receiver in Juju actually beat him in yards, even though Antonio was the far better player. My point is they had another super productive wide receiver on the team. Big Ben led the NFL in passing yards, and yet they're done for the year. And yet they had the worst season they've had under Mike Tomlin, or at least close to it. 8-8's the worst they've had technically, I think, given the talent on the team. Yes. This is the worst year that they've had. You are always going to have an accountability problem in this locker room as long as Big Ben's the quarterback, because Big Ben has never been held accountable by the organization, and therefore he can't be held accountable by the coach. We know that Big Ben is not popular in that locker room. We know that based on the fact that he's only won team MVP once, the fact that he consistently throws teammates under the bus. But he's there. There's nothing you can do about Big Ben. He is a made man. If you want to set any type of precedent for accountability for the next time you have a guy like Martavis Bryant, whose career could go one way or another, the next time you have a guy like Le'Veon Bell, forget the holdout, who fails one drug test, and you might need to realize, hey, man, you fail another one, your time with the team could be done. We don't know how Juju's career, what direction it's going to take. You have to, at some point, say, we are going to take a stand. And I'm never the take a stand guy. But I got to know you're going to show up for work. And you're right, he has shown up for game days, but he wasn't available in week 17 because of the decisions he made leading up to it. And I just wonder what the narrative would have been if Mitch McCrane, their rookie addition at kicker, because Boswell got hurt, if he missed his field goals, or Matt McCrane, pardon me, if he missed his field goals, and if Baker Mayfield had finished off that drive, that if the Ravens had lost and the Steelers still missed out in the playoffs because they couldn't crack 10 points in a must-win game against the Bengals because AB's not there, Juju's getting double-teamed all game instead of AB getting double-teamed, and the offense is shut down because of it.
But, Nick, you mentioned earlier that there was 2 reasons why, and one of them was the cap hit. It's a significant cap hit if they try to get rid of him.
Well, so it's $22 million if he's on the team next year, and it's $21 million if he's not. So I understand the argument of, okay, so it's only $1 extra million.
But you get something for the first one.
Well, but you would get some. I'm not saying they cut him. We live in a world where Amari Cooper got a first-round pick.
Yes.
And we live in a world where Khalil Mack, knowing that they were going to have to pay him a record-setting contract, got you 2 first-round picks. So what does Antonio Brown get you if the team that's trading for him has him for the next 3 years for $12 million a year? I think it's more than a first. I don't know if it's 2 firsts, but I think there's a team in Green Bay that's got a couple first-round picks, right?
Yeah.
That I think would be interested in a first and third for Antonio Brown. So you don't cut him, but I would. That's why I said I would test the waters.
Sure.
I would see, can I get enough value production back to make it worthwhile trading away who I agree with you is the best receiver in the NFL.
Well, that's the balance of it, right? Because the GM for the Green Bay Packers, he recognized his team wasn't good enough to compete for a championship, so he did make some moves and be able to acquire some draft capital. But when you're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers, Ben Roethlisberger is older than Aaron Rodgers.
Yep.
And Ben Roethlisberger only has 1 more year under contract. They just signed Aaron Rodgers to a 4-year contract extension. So you're going to have him for 4 more seasons after 2018. So it made sense for them to push the reset button this season. I don't know if the Steelers can afford to do that. Now, as far as your point about Mike Tomlin and preserving the integrity of his messaging to the rest of the locker room, I'm just going to go back to something that Jimmy Johnson said a long time ago. I'll treat all my players fairly, but I won't treat all my players equally. And the guys in the locker room understand that. They know that having 84 on the field gives them a better chance to win than not having it.
But here's the thing. I could even go down that bridge with you if Tomlin had played him on Sunday. Because it's not like AB didn't show up to the stadium Sunday.
But what's the rumor, though, Nick? They didn't play because AB was upset at Ben Roethlisberger, and they had a blow-up during the course of the week. And you just said that the organization has a problem holding Ben Roethlisberger accountable. So is it the quarterback that's the problem or the wide receiver?
I think both are I think right now AB is a bigger problem. I think Ben Roethlisberger is maybe the stem of all of this. But the point that I'm making is, even for Mike Tomlin, who is always, like Jimmy Johnson, I think had different rules for different guys, said, this is a bridge too far. In our biggest game of the year, I'm not going to play you. When you make that decision, I think you're being foolish if you don't at least field some phone calls and see what Antonio Brown's trade value is.
And you have to assume that decision went higher than Mike Tomlin as well. That was probably a collective Pittsburgh Steelers decision.
I don't know.
To play Antonio,
to not play that. I mean, who plays and who doesn't play?
I think that's on Mike Tomlin.
Really?
That's not on the general manager.
The trade would be the collective. I think who plays on Sunday is a Mike Tomlin decision.
All right, we got to take a break. Coming up, is it Zeke or bust for the Cowboys as they get ready to play the Seattle Seahawks? That's next on First Things First.